SVC Media.
Welcome to the iGaming Daily Podcast, analysing the news from the betting and gaming industry all over the globe, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market.
As an industry, iGaming knows all about KYC practices to ensure proper anti-money laundering measures. The sector also knows all about the risks of not adequately doing these processes and allowing nefarious figures into the site. But what about suppliers? As highlighted in a number of recent cases, operators need to be fully aware of the risks associated with working with companies who may be doing things not quite above board, whether in your specific jurisdiction or anywhere else in the world. So, in the words of one of our guests today, is your supply chain fine or fine worthy? Welcome back to iGaming Daily, supported by Optimove, the creator of positionless marketing and the #1 player engagement platform. I'm Charlie Horner, and today I'm joined by Neal Luke, principal consultant at Luke Arc, and Warren Russell, CEO of iDP. Neal, Warren, thanks ever so much for joining me today. Warren, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, it's a good day today, and a good day to talk regulatory fines and how to avoid them.
Absolutely. And Neal, thanks for joining us. How are you doing today?
Yeah, great. Thank you. And always equally excited to talk about the fun world of compliance.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I referenced it at the top. We're all aware of doing the checks and the due diligence on consumers, as it's a core part of remaining compliant in most jurisdictions. But perhaps we often overlook and underrepresent due diligence on the supply chain. So, Warren, I'll come to you first on this. What are the risks associated with not properly checking the supply chain?
I think they're sort of multifold, really, because you're not just talking about supply chain. You know, in the iGaming sector, you're talking about affiliates, you're talking about game providers, you're talking about, you know, operational providers to your core business. So, you know, even if you just park to one side, you know, potentially landing yourself in hot water by speaking to somebody that you shouldn't be speaking to, or working with somebody, you have a weak link. You know, it's an old saying, isn't it? Your business is only as strong as the weakest link. And if there's one in there, then the whole thing can come down like a stack of cards quite quickly. So I think, you know, as you said right at the outset, Charlie, there's a lot of focus. There's probably a podcast every week on KYC, but it's very often the overlooked, underserved conversation when looking at the other parts of your business that you should still apply the same due diligence to, whether it's from a regulatory perspective or just a commercial operational perspective.
And Neal, this isn't a theoretical issue that we're dealing with, is it? You know, this is something that has come up several times recently. We don't have to go into the specifics of any individual case, but we're seeing that this is an issue that operators are having to deal with. Yeah,
no, absolutely. Look, I very much focus on the UK market, and the UK Gambling Commission's licensing objectives aren't focused purely on B2C. You know, keeping criminality out of gambling, knowing where the source of funds has came from, making sure that partners are advertising responsibly. It all overlaps to the B2B side. And, you know, the Gambling Commission are very sharp and have made a few notable releases recently regarding having due diligence to the suitability and background of your B2B partners.
And so how much responsibility do operators have for ensuring that they are checking every part of the supply chain? And how active is the Gambling Commission on this kind of thing? Well, we're all based in the UK for listeners, so perhaps we'll stick to maybe a UK outlook, but this may also apply for other jurisdictions as well.
Yeah, of course. Well, listen, the licence conditions and codes of practice makes it very clear that any licensed operator has full responsibility for any third parties that they engage with. They're responsible for oversight of those third parties. The third parties should be acting in a manner as if they were the licence holders. And even down to the point of contractual clauses, it's required that your contract allows you to exit the arrangement should they cause non-compliance on their part. I mean, historically, you know, affiliate providers has been a big issue. You are required to do a reasonable level of due diligence on your affiliates. that might range from, your small ones in a bedroom where you just kind of get documents from the UBOs to your bigger companies where you should really be knowing exactly how well founded they are, where the source of funds have came from in certain places. They're not necessarily asking you to get, documents from Jeffrey Bezos if you use AWS, but it's all about proportionality. And I mean, one notable release recently from the Gambling Commission was regarding licensed software on black market websites. So assumedly there's been some due diligence that should have been done on any people that they're licensing their games to. Source of funds, legitimacy should be checked. And then monitoring, documentation's one thing, a quick Google's another. But what you don't want to do is be tied into businesses that then draw negative attention from regulators.
And I think, though, it's important to say that, negative attention from regulators is one thing, but there's also a big reputational thing. I've been working in the KYC, AML, due diligence sector for 15 plus years now. And over the years, I've seen spikes around certain geopolitical events, where organizations don't want to be associated with certain jurisdictions potentially, and I know this is an iGaming podcast, but I've seen businesses in unregulated sectors who would have never been on my radar as a particular customer, but suddenly get in touch and say, hang on a minute, such and such has happened in this part of the world. We want to make sure that none of our supply chain is involved in that sector because we don't want the negative publicity that goes with it. Whereas, one could argue loosely that consumer KYC is very much one level. The risk of being associated with an individual from a reputation perspective is arguably lower than being involved with a high profile business that has come under scrutiny. I'm sure we can all come up with examples in the recent press of certain individuals we wouldn't want involved in our business in any way, shape or form. But I think, that when you're looking at your supply chain and your corporate partners, you've got a lot of different levels to go into the brand of the business, the owners of the business, you name it.
And presumably you're going to need a very hefty paper trail to be able to prove all this to the Gambling Commission, because I'd imagine the Gambling Commission won't just accept, oh, well, we've checked that our partners aren't doing anything nefarious in any jurisdiction. They'll want to see a paper trail that proves all of this. So Warren, I'm sure this is something that you deal with a lot at iDP. Tell us about how this works.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of always been the problem child of the industry. And when I say the industry, I guess I mean any industry that has to do some kind of due diligence on its players, partners, customers, suppliers, whatever it might be. There's a lot of excellent KYC solutions out there, but one of the things they always struggled with was unstructured documents. And when you're looking into corporate due diligence, let's face it, a lot of the documents are erring towards the unstructured or non-traditional type documents where you're looking at somebody's profit and loss account, you're looking at a year's bank statements, you're looking at all these documents that somebody has to sit there and read. And I'm sure Neal will take the opportunity in a minute to chime in and say, what the GC are sort of expecting. But, you're going from a simple passport and entry on the electoral register to verify somebody through to layers and layers of corporate intelligence, for want of a better phrase, that can be anything from licenses to, as I say, accounts to, you name it. I'm sure that at some point it's landed on the GC's desk.
Yeah, there's been a few cases I've seen, obviously. I mean, we work with 50, 60 UK operators quite regularly. White label providers certainly has their own struggles. There's been a few historic cases where the Gambling Commission have noted insufficient due diligence on white label partners. As Warren says, I think people are much more kind of aware of the risks these days with the whole B2C model. Bank statements are, you need to be detective, AML analyst in this day and age. You need to be going back the next level where the source of funds linked somewhere else. With corporate due diligence, very much making sure that you've got proper assurances of where the funds have come from, the legitimacy of the business, And in terms of kind of the level of due diligence, I mean, one benchmark for best practice is, if you look at a gambling commission license application, they will be asking for 6 months of bank statements. They will be asking for the corporate structure, the group structure. They'll be looking for links to any other businesses on their side as well. They'll be looking for adverse media. If those bank statements show that funds have came in from somewhere else, they will then ask for evidence of that. If that evidence then shows funds have came from the previous step, they will go back and source of funds means the source. They can take a little bit more confidence from like publicly traded companies and what have you. I mean, our due diligence consultant, Stephen, was the head of forensic accounting for the Gambling Commission. He literally defined the process that they follow, and he could talk for hours on just the kind of level of detail that these can go into. Now, I'm not saying that if you've got B2B partners, you need to go to that level of detail every time, but you've got to be able to offer your assurances that you have satisfied yourself and third-party ridicule, being the commission, that those businesses are all legitimate, well-founded, trustworthy, and compliant to what they need to be compliant to.
Sure. Well, we've seen in recent weeks that the Gambling Commission is very active on this kind of thing, and all compliance enforcement action at the moment. They seem to be releasing several news bulletins per week on these kind of things. It's really important that businesses and operators are taking care and looking at the entire supply chain. But for now, Warren, Neal, we'll take a quick break and then we'll talk a little bit about the consumer side and then some of the solutions to some of these challenges.
SBC Leaders connects the gambling industry's top-tier operators and associations to share the best ideas, collaborate on solving the biggest issues, and push innovation throughout the betting and gaming industry. If you're an operator and want to join the discussion, visit sbcleaders.com for more information.
Welcome back to iGaming Daily. Today we're talking all about KYC and AML and all the compliance solutions that go around it. I'm joined by Neal Luke, Principal Consultant at Luke Arc, and Warren Russell, Founder and CEO of iDP. Warren, Neal, we spoke before the break about the supply chain side of things. Let's move to the consumer side of this sector. Warren, what are the biggest challenges when it comes to KYC checks for consumers? Is it that there's potentially friction, or too much friction for the consumer? Is it a costly process? What are some of the big challenges that operators face?
Yeah, I think there's quite a few. And if we link it back to what we talked about in the first half, ultimately when you're doing supplier or affiliate or partner due diligence, that involves doing due diligence and KYC on consumers as well, because businesses are owned by people. And regardless of where you operate and where your customers are based, the consumers involved in your network could be all over the world. So you might be a UK operator that's only attracting UK players, but within your supply chain, there could be people in Africa, Asia, the US, whatever it might be. So often what we find is the challenges it's proper 80-20 rule. 20% of your KYC processes and your due diligence processes give you 80% of the work, because they're the edge cases that perhaps, your flow through bread and butter, 2+2 check, married guy, 2.4 kids, mortgage, Mondeo on the drive, bread and butter KYC straight through, no issues. It's always the edge cases. And what I've seen and speaking to operators over the years is it's those difficulties, it's those once in a blue moons that either mean they just can't enter into a relationship with the person, or it takes up an inordinate amount of time. So I think it's those challenges around how we deal with the person who doesn't go through bog standard KYC. What do we have to ask? And now, as we move into the realms of more and more due diligence required at spend thresholds, loss thresholds, the types of due diligence and, kind of KYC due diligence, responsible gaming, safer gambling, financial vulnerability, all AML, all these words and terms are largely used interchangeably. But you find that the supporting evidence required for some of it is not just a passport and entry on a credit reference agency. So I think that's the area where we we enjoy speaking to our customers about those challenges that they face and dealing with them. And I could speak on about it for ages, but you're getting into the realms of international documents and all this difficult jazz. But from my perspective, that's what we see the challenges for our customers. Neil, I don't know if you've got a different, an applications or.
No, I'd actually, I'd completely agree on the 80-20 rule, and maybe even further for our industry. I mean, the nuanced cases will take up sometimes a lot more time than your average kind of green tick pass, no issues. I mean, an example being if you can't verify someone automatically and you have to request manual documents, if you've requested bank statements for proof of address, and this is a common issue, you need to ridicule all the information that's been sent in. If someone sends in a bank statement, it might have been only requested for proof of address, but if that's showing overdraft usage, a lot of layered transactions, big cash payments in, you can't ignore that. You're required to take into account all of the information that's presented in front of you. On the B2C side, financial vulnerability checks, are you actually looking at why this person flagged with a red or an amber, depending how you grade things and what the indicators were. So yeah, absolutely. When you're looking into UBOs, B2B, B2C, KYC, that information that you get in, sometimes you can really find a rabbit hole that you need to go down, and that those awkward ones can be very time consuming, and it's very easy to miss things as well.
You can't unsee what you've seen, basically. And
yeah.
I think where the industry is at a real advantage now compared to where it was 5 years ago or more is, and I hate to use a buzzword, but with the advances in AI, the ability to use LLMs and understand context of a document and validate or cross-reference information across a series of documents. As Neil said, a document that you've asked for as a proof of address, but happens to be a bank statement. You don't have to spend hours going through that bank statement. There's technology providers out there that can now read that, summarize it, compare it to the pay slips that you've got, the utility bill that you saw 3 months ago that you've forgotten that you've had, and all this different information can in essence create a better picture and a better view of what that customer's telling you, and does that information make sense, and does that information stack up?
Yeah, I think just to add to something you said there about overseas documents as well, Warren, it's something else that catches people out, because the people that the big partners, the big customers, they generally aren't PAYE making 30 grand a year at a normal job kind of customers or partners. And something I've seen catch a lot of operators out is where there's been overseas documents sent in. It might be passports, it might be company information, but it comes from an overseas jurisdiction. And the first thing the Gambling Commission will say in an assessment is, how are your staff trained to understand what a document from that jurisdiction looks like? They might look at UK passports every day, and sometimes it can really catch people unstuck, and they'll say, we don't see many of them. Oh, I understand that, but you've seen one here. How do your staff know what they're looking at? And there's a few answers that people can give, but it's not easy to train all your staff to recognise all these documents. Near on impossible to train your staff to recognise all these. So sometimes you do need to get solutions in place for it.
Mm-hmm. One thing I'm noticing here is that this can get very, very complicated very, very quickly. And because there's a sheer volume of documentation that needs to be checked, it seems like it might be quite difficult to strike a balance between the thoroughness of these checks and how deep they need to go versus the volume. So how can you find a balance between those two? And to your point earlier, Warren, is this something that AI can help to speed up? And do we still need humans to do these checks?
Yes, we absolutely do.
It's good to know.
But I think the key thing that businesses need to use and look at how the new technology platforms out there can help is allowing your highly trained, and let's be honest, highly expensive resource on a comparative capacity, allow them to focus on the edge cases, the difficult ones, use the technology to increase the happy path, and basically bring the things to the attention of your trained people. It's not scalable now to do this just with with people. You know, consumers are spoilt for choice and will hop between operators, you know, as soon as they can. So dealing with that flow through, the only way you can do it is through technology. I'm probably going to show my political ignorance as well here, but I think it's something Donald Rumsfeld said about, you know, you don't know what you don't know. So that's why working with, you know, trusted external advisors, such as somebody maybe on the call, who can help you gear your policies around what you need to do and know where you need to look, and then using that advice and using that guidance to select a trusted technology partner to go through and streamline the processes, reduce time to live for players, reduce time to review and get those players active again. So it's not a single answer of have a piece of tech or have the right policy or only operate in this sector or only do this. You've got to have a complete package of everything to be able to work seamlessly together.
Yeah, if I might just add a sentence or two there. I think, Charlie, you know, you joke about kind of will AI replace us in this? I think more it will let you get through what you need to do. I think at the moment, a lot of operators are struggling to go into the level of detail that they need to do with the resource available. And, you know, I mean, I've seen the iDP platform. It's like, boom, you've got a report kind of written in half a second, and it still kind of needs a bit of human oversight. Everything should have that, but it makes a 30-minute job a 2-minute job, you know, and a lot of certainly clients, operators I know in the industry, really struggle to get through the volumes of checks that kind of need to be done in the level of detail that they want to be doing them, and need some level of protection against human error as well. So hybrid is definitely got some big advantages.
I think the big phrase we're going to see lots and lots over the coming weeks and months and years is human in the loop, the combination of tech and people.
Well, yeah, that's kind of my one of my closing thoughts, really, just as we come towards the end, is, you know, is that the main takeaway that you think that people should take from this session, is that you need to have that blend of technology, expertise, guidance that can help bring all of these things together, so you have processes in place for these KYC checks on both suppliers and consumers as well. Is there something else that we perhaps should be monitoring and keeping an eye out for?
I think you're absolutely right. You know, the tech is advancing faster than it ever has, really. And so I think, you know, potentially that, you know, a new department or an expanded department in businesses now will be what else is available out in the industry department, you know, who will continuously review what is being launched and what is happening. Obviously, you know, majority of operators and businesses have, you know, compliance functions who would, you know, liaise with people like Neal and stuff and make sure that their policies are keeping up to date with changing regulation. But I don't think a lot of businesses really focus on keeping up with changing tech. So it's absolutely imperative that those two things live in harmony, and that's the only way that you can keep compliance as a competitive edge in a very hectic sector.
Great. And Neal, if you have any closing comments, then feel free to chime in.
Yeah. I mean, it's some things to add in that, you know, we speak about the hybrid solutions, the human in the loop, which is definitely a phrase I'm going to steal. Appreciate that. I think some of the common failings that we see in the background, I mean, we work behind the scenes on countless enforcement cases. You know, often we get called in when it's kind of damage control and what have you. Humans missing stuff is inevitable. Now, if that's kind of a blip and it's not systemic, that's one thing. But, you know, if you're looking at due diligence in a compliance assessment, whether it's partner or customer, and you've been given that information, as Warren says, you can't unsee something, then having some form of protection against human error is really important, because, yeah, you can have one customer account review, one partner due diligence check that shows a blip, and you look, yeah, it was a mistake, we dealt with it, we put training in place, this is what we did, that's fine. But, you know, if the Gambling Commission are doing an assessment of a white label provider who's got 30 websites on there, and they're looking over the due diligence that have been done on these partners, and none of it's up to scratch, or it's just a bank statement that hasn't actually been looked at, there's payments coming in from overseas, high-risk jurisdictions, and this is systemic, then you can expect to find your name on the Commission's website pretty sharpish with a big number attached to it. Yeah, staff training will cover so much. You're also required to have automation on actions for customer interaction. It's actually a requirement. You can't just be working off Excel sheets. And one of the big things that you see in the regulatory settlements on that side of things is failure to take timely action. So yeah, anything that saves time, keeps you up to speed on things is really important, whether that's procedures, technology, or having 200 staff that are sat there 24 hours a day at the keyboards.
Well, Neal and Warren, thank you very much for joining us today. I'm afraid we've run out of time, but thanks again for your expertise and insights into this one. And thank you to the audience for listening to today's episode of iGaming Daily. Please tune in tomorrow to keep up to date with all the latest global gambling news.
Thank you for listening to today's iGaming Daily podcast, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. If you want to find out more about some of the subjects raised today, feel free to explore any of the sites in the SBC News Network or check out the latest edition of the SBC Leaders magazine. Happy reading.